So, hello everybody. This week's this week's Parsha is Toldot, and Toldot is a special teaching for me, definitely. And the hand of God was in the God is moving things. One of the signs is that when timing works out. So even in the Shema, when we say the Shema, God says to us, if you abide by my laws, I will give you the rain in its proper season. So the way that God interacts with us in this world is through the timing. So today, the timing worked perfectly in the sense that I am at my parents' house in Rehoboth, and Rehoboth is my hometown. I grew up here, and it is the in the parsha this today. It is one of the central teaching of this parsha, and we'll get to it. So, in terms of timing, it couldn't have worked better than that. And it's also interesting in terms of timing because Toldot means generations. So the fact that I'm at my parents' house is interesting. And even further is Toldot talks about the generations that moved from Abraham to Isaac. So last Shabbat, we were learning about the birth of Isaac and the his following his father's footsteps. Now, this parasha is all about Isaac, and Isaac doesn't get a lot of attention in the Torah, but this parasha is all about Isaac and his children. But Isaac is a pivotal character because he's the middle of the three forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Abraham comes from outside of the land into the land. And then Jacob, his son, goes out from the land to Haran, where Abraham came from, his grandfather. And then eventually he returns, but then, of course, he goes down to Egypt again later on, and he dies in Egypt. So Isaac is the pivotal character on many levels. He is the one character that never left the land, and he's the one character that that is very stable. And the idea of Isaac, which really this whole parasha is about him, is the fact that he is the first generation that Abraham moves from being a convert into Judaism. In a sense, he begins Judaism and he circumcises and he moves into the land. But now the biggest challenge, and that is why Abraham was chosen. When God chooses Abraham, it says he chose Abraham because he knew, God said that he will teach his children the tradition. He will pass on the tradition, because if it would have stopped with Abraham, then doesn't mean a lot. So Abraham is of course very important, and he begins this process. But Isaac is where the proof in the pudding would be. Is if Isaac catches on to Abraham's entrepreneurship here of the beginning of this religion, or way of life, that he chooses, of course, believing in one God and not limiting God into one place and one time. So Isaac and this story in Toldot today is pivotal and very important. So the story begins with this is the story of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Okay, so the Talmud says, why is it important to tell us that this is the story of Isaac, son of Abraham, and then that Abraham begot Isaac? It seems superfluous. So why is it not superfluous? Because the Talmud says that it was very important to make sure people will read and will know that Isaac is Abraham's son from Sarah, that he is his biological son. Why? Because the story beforehand was when there was a story with Sarah and Abraham when they had to go down to Egypt when there was a famine, and they pretended to be a brother and sister because Abraham was afraid that they will kill him and take Sarah because she was very beautiful. And the law in ancient Near East was that you can't be with a married woman. But if you kill her husband, somehow this logic, now she's not taken and you can be with her. So, and you will see that Isaac had the same incident here with Rebecca, that they have to go to Gerar, to another place because there was a famine. And when they go there, Isaac does the same thing as his father did, pretending that Rebecca was his sister, so they don't kill him. So it's important to know that Isaac didn't come from Abimelech, that king that took Sarah first. So that's why it tells us that Abraham begot Isaac. And then it says Isaac was 40 years old when he took to wife Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban and the Aramean. So last Shabbat, we finished where Abraham dies as well, and Isaac brings Rebekah into Sarah's tent, and he begins his new life with Rebekah, and he's consoled after losing his mother. So it's telling us that he was 40 at the time, and that Rebekah is the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, and so forth. Okay, now what happens? It says Isaac pleaded with God on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and God responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. So that's amazing because all the four mothers were barren one way or another, and God, through their prayers, through their supplications, relented and opened their wombs, literally in Hebrew. So the Talmud asks, you're starting a whole nation, and you're telling Abraham your nation is going to be myriads of multitudes, and this is how you start, with being barren? And the answer is yes, because the Talmud answers, because God created this whole world in order to insert Israel into it, or a nation that will be connected to God. And what is the deepest connection? The deepest connection comes through prayer. When we open our hearts to God. So through making the four mothers barren, God forces them and the forefathers to pray to God, to supplicate. And this is when this is what God favors the most, that we come to him with an open heart. So that's why we all started in that situation. But it says in one verse, because we know that Sarah was barren for many years, right? She was 90 when she gave birth to Isaac. And we know that Rachel was also the Jacob's wife later on. She's barren for many years too, until she gives birth to Joseph and then later on Benjamin, and she dies at birth, giving Benjamin birth. So there's something about the process of birthing that is hard. And I'm sure your question now is, how come Leah wasn't barren? And the Talmud asked this question too. Wait a minute, Jacob was married to two wives, and one of them was not barren. So why is she not barren? And the Talmud answers, she would have been barren as well. But God opened her womb because she was hated by her husband. So to compensate her and then giving her the children that she then hoped that would bring Jacob closer to her, that is the reason that she did not start off being a barren. Okay, now she's pregnant, and God listens to Isaac's plea, and he opens Rebecca's womb, and she gets pregnant. But something, even in the pregnancy itself, is not smooth. What happens is, it says, but the children struggled in her womb, and she said, if so, why do I exist? So she went to inquire of God. So what happens? She has these two fetuses, and she is worried that something she doesn't know. She has two fetuses. She just feels that her pregnancy is not smooth. So she goes to inquire, and God says to her, two nations are in your womb, two separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Okay? Wow. What is happening here? The Talmud needs a lot of midrashim, stories behind the story to explain. And one of the stories is that when she was pregnant and she felt something was wrong, is when she passed by a Jewish place, a worship of one God. Jacob would move, and when she moved by a pagan place, an idol worshiping place, Esau moved. So it means that now she understands when God tells her there are two nations, she understands. Okay, so I have two, but it means that they're not living in harmony because they keep fighting even in the womb. So she is very worried about it, but she already has the insight that they're not going to be identical, peaceful twins. So then she gives birth, and she has the twins, and the first one comes out. The first one emerges red, like a hairy mantle all over. So they named him Esau. So the word Esau in Hebrew, Esav, the Talmud says, comes from the word asui, that he was already made. He was born already mature, hairy. They compare him to the sun, while Jacob is the moon, and we'll explain that. But he's red, and he's mature and hairy. And then his brother emerges holding on to the heel of Esau. So they named him Jacob. Why Jacob while holding the heel of Esau? Because the word Jacob in Hebrew, Yaakov, is the same word as akev, heel, in Hebrew. So he held to his heel, but also it's the same word as being delayed or to delay someone. And it also means to follow someone. So Jacob starts off very differently than his brother Esau, that comes out already made. He's a leader. He moves forward. Jacob is a follower. He holds the heel of his brother, and somehow he's a follower. Okay, so that's his beginning. So what is the connection between the sun and the moon here? It's a very beautiful comparison. So the sun, it has its own light, right? The moon reflects the light of the sun. So in one sense, the moon is the follower of the sun. The sun is the leader and the moon is the follower. But there's something about the sun and the moon that we as the Jewish people, somehow we follow the moon. We adjust to the sun, our calendar adjusts to the sun. But why isn't our calendar revolved around the sun? So there's a beautiful midrash. It's one of my favorite midrashim stories in the Talmud, and the midrash says that originally God created the world with two luminaries that were reflecting lights. It was both like the sun, and they were both reflecting lights. But what happened? One of them came to God and said, how can two kings sit on the same throne? How can two kings rule from the same throne? And God said to that luminary, said, well, if you can't handle it, then go and reduce yourself. Meaning, what happens to it? The light was taken away from it. Now, it's a very deep story here. Why? Because it really essentially speaks about jealousy and about the disharmony that people can feel in this world, really for nothing. Why does it bother you that there are two suns, that you're one of two? Look how amazing God created you. You reflect light. You are a sun. Do you mind? Do you care if there's another sun on the other side? So what? It doesn't take anything away from you. But the idea of jealousy is the feeling that someone is taking something away from you. And there's no way to satisfy and explain to someone who's jealous. So God works here through this midrash in a practical way. God does not argue with us. He wants to teach us. So he tells that other son, go and reduce yourself. So that luminary became the moon. It lost its own light, and now it's reflecting the light. So now what happens is that, yes, there's one king, so to speak, the sun, ruling from one throne, but what happened in the world, that darkness came to the world. Before that, when there were two luminaries, there was always sun, there was always light, because they would revolve. So now that jealousy brought darkness into the world. So it's a very deep concept, which means that our world now has something that is lacking. So Jacob, the follower, the one that holds the heel of his brother, is the representation of that moon that doesn't have its own light. It's going through, reflecting his brother's light. Now, Esau is the full, he's right, the word Esav comes from the word asui, already made up. He's complete like the sun, and he's red also. So he doesn't go through phases. We know that the moon goes through phases, and Jacob has the Jewish people is like the moon that has its phases. So why shouldn't we just be like the moon? Because the sun, as much as it is complete, it doesn't go through spiritual cycles like the breath. One day we want to be like the sun, but right now the world is not there. And people who say, I'm done, I'm complete, I'm all perfect, right? It's not really real. So in the Midrash, God said to the luminary that reduced itself, it went back to God and said, wait a minute, I posed a legitimate question here. How two kings can rule from the same throne, and you told me to reduce myself. And God said, okay, I hear you, and I hear you again. So what I'll do, I'll compensate you. And the way that I will compensate you is have my people, the Jewish people, revolve around you, not the sun. So we, as the Jewish people, revolve around the moon that has phases. And we know that the Jewish people went through phases all the time, right? We go up and down. We come back to the land, and when we are exiled again, and then we sin, right? We bring darkness. We move away from God, and then God brings us back. These are reflected in the cycles of the moon that goes away and comes back. And that's, of course, one of the essences of the Jewish people, that we're like we come back from the ashes all the time, which of course means and exemplifies the idea of the rise of the dead, and that life is eternal with its cycles. So this is where Isaac and Esau and Jacob are placed in the Jewish story to begin with. Isaac is complete, but he's lacking the spiritual cycle. Jacob is a follower, but he moves with the Spirit. So this is where they are. And then it continues to say, the boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. But Jacob became a mild man, raising livestock. So livestock, there could be other interpretation of the word in Hebrew, because the word in Hebrew is ish tam yoshev ohalim, someone who dwells in tents. But what it means that while Esau is a hunter, he's an outdoors person, Jacob stays and studies. He's in the Beit Midrash. He studies Torah. So he's more of a student, right? And we know that the world is kind of divided to these two types of people who like to be outdoors, and people who like homebodies, or people who like to study. So this is where they are. And Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah favored Jacob. So that's an interesting also. We already see the split here in the family. There's the favorite, but there's something about even the way that this phrase is written, that Isaac favored Esau. However, what's wrong here is it says Isaac favored Esau because he had taste for game. So it means that he loves him. His love depends on something, right? So, but Rebekah loves Jacob, and it's not dependent on anything. It just says, but Rebekah favored Jacob, and the word in Hebrew is love. It's not just favored. I think the translation here kind of reduces the level of emotion here. It says Isaac loved Esau because he had game. He was a hunter, but Rebecca loved Jacob.
That's so weird.
Yes.
It says love here. Love.
It said, yes. So some translations, I'm sure, would say, I'm looking at the Safaria translation, and that's what they chose to use. And then once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open, famished. He was very tired, and Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, for I am famished," which is why he was named Edom. So in the translation, it doesn't work, but Edom, the Adamite, comes from the word Adom, red. So everything about Esau is red. He is red. He hunts, clearly deals with blood, and then he sees that red thing and stew, and he wants it. And Jacob said, "Okay, first sell me your birthright." And that's a big question here, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And Esau said, "I'm at the point of death, so what use I have with my birthright?" So because he was born first, he has the birthright. But, and this is a big but here, this is huge for the Jewish story. The Jewish story is different in many ways, of course, but one of the things that it is different, and this parasha is called Toledot, the generations. In England, for example, the royal family, if you are the firstborn, you are by default going to be the king or the queen, right? Which was changed to the queen. Originally it was just the male, but then it was changed to female too. But the point is that if you were born first, you are going to be, you have the birthright. So here we see the story changes. And we know that the Torah, to begin with, tries to tell us that the birthright do not go directly or by default to the older one. How do we know that? Tell me just a couple of stories just from previous generations. Well, the first generation, right? Cain and Abel. Cain was older than Abel, but Abel was the one that God accepted his offering. Then we have Abraham with his two children. We have Ishmael and Isaac, and Ishmael clearly is older, but he doesn't get the birthright. So what the Torah tries to tell us, that this is a new story. We're not just going to continue ancient traditions that are, I don't know, they could be pagan or they could just be faulty, because we know from royalty in the world, if you just give it to the firstborn, you can get in trouble because they may not be the perfect fit, the best fit to be the next person that would manage the family's business, right? If you have children and you have a successful business, are you going to just give it to the older one, even though you know that they don't have skills to manage the business? No, you're not going to do it because you don't want to lose the business. So Judaism, the Torah is telling us the business of Judaism is so important that it has to go to the person with the most merits, not with the firstborn. So we'll see already from the first generation, now the second generation, we'll see the struggle over the birthright. And if you think about it, the whole story of the Bible is about the birthright, the chosenness, right? The Jewish people were chosen, and the nations that want to show us that we're not that chosen, and that They try to show it to us over and over by exiling us, by taking us from the sources of our blessing, the land, God, through seducing us to sin and so forth. So really, this is what it's about. And Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. So first of all, if you even are willing to sell your birthright, or even think that it's something that you can sell, it means right then and there you lost the birthright, because it means you don't even understand what it's about. Not something you can sell. So they have this agreement between them, and then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he rose and went away. Thus did Esau spurn the birthright. So he doesn't really value, he doesn't even know what that means. Now we see this story that also will have the name Rehoboth in it, Rehoboth. And for those who came a few minutes after we started, I'm at my parents' house in Rehoboth, my hometown where I grew up. And the name Rehoboth is central in this parasha, this Shabbat. I didn't plan it this way, that I'll be in Rehoboth. I just realized that after I've been committed to being here with my parents, and then I realized, wait a minute, wow, it's the hand of God. So this story is really crucial, because it's telling us about the three wells that Isaac digs in the land. So we'll skip a little bit ahead. There was a famine in the land, and Isaac tries to dig the water, and he is. It says that we're in verse 12. Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold that year, and God blessed him. So somehow there's a famine, but Isaac figures out how to do cultivate the land, and he's very successful. So, and people see it, and the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. So he's in this land, and even though this land was promised to his father and to him, again, it's the same concept. Still, we have to live with the people in the land and the circumstances of the land. God doesn't give it to us on a silver platter. We need to work for it. We need to cultivate ourselves in the land. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to hold on to it. It's not like the desert that God brought the people through the desert and took care of them and all their needs. Here in the land, we need to take care of our own needs. God helps us, and the hand of God is in everything, but it's a hidden hand. We need to do the work. So he does the work, and he's very successful. And what happened? Yes.
Is that okay? Can I interrupt?
Yes, please.
So it's interesting because I'm teaching the Odyssey to my 10th graders, and we are talking about this exact balance between why doesn't the god just swoop in and save Odysseus or save Telemachus, and it's the same explanation, I think, which is that the person has to be readied for the job, right? They have to be prepared. They have to. It's not just a deus ex machina moment. God doesn't, even the gods in ancient Greece, they don't just appear and say, here it is. They make the person develop over time so that they're strong enough and have the skills to at least do most of it by themselves, even if they have a defined hand. But my question, if I could ask about Jacob and Esau, because this has always bothered me. And every time I've tried to explain it to my students, it's very hard morally to understand how Esau, who was favored by his father, Esau, who it seems, was very hungry, and basically Jacob, I mean, in some translations, I know it's tricked. I'm not Jacob, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jacob tricked
Isaac.
him. No, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Jacob tricked
Yeah,
Isaac.
Jacob tricked Esau, right?
Isaac, his
Isaac?
father.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry. But wasn't that also, didn't he kind of trick Esau, or at least is,
Well,
but
you could say he
he held
tricked
him
him
hostage.
with this the sale of the
Food. But
birthright.
but it was food. It wasn't gold, it wasn't jewels. He was hungry. And if someone is starving, would you rather have, the mansion or the food? So I don't understand. I just don't understand that. And then if Esau was full grown, and I like this, I appreciate the stuff, the lesson about the phases and the moon, and that you have to go through different phases and it's part of your development. But I still morally can't get. I don't know how to explain that to students. I really don't. That somehow that
That
Jacob
Jacob
now
is that
Jacob is now
Jacob
the
is
one
such
who,
a
yeah, that
pure
he
person and Esau is the bad person, the bad guy.
exactly, and that
Okay,
Jacob
yes.
did the right thing.
Absolutely. Listen, it's not that simple. The Talmud talks about it. Absolutely. First of all, they say that Esau was the person in the Bible that honored his parents, definitely his father, the most. He serves his father, and he has this commitment towards his parents. So yes, he's a multifaceted character, just like every character in the Bible, and Jacob is too. Yes, Jacob is not a pure person. Even Joseph later on, when he is one of the only characters in the Bible that gets the title righteous, he was not righteous all the time, right? He started as a pompous kid who had a dream that all his family is going to be his servants. So he needed to learn, also go through phases and learn and mature. So Esau, right, he's not necessarily a bad person in all aspects. And it could be that later on, because he felt cheated, he did a few things that bothered his parents, and we'll get there. But yes, not all opinions say that he was this monster we want to portray him as. So he was not.
And
But
I hate
what
to
he
say this.
definitely, but just 1 second, one definitely in our story, for our purposes, he was the, let's say, the extra, just like Ishmael was the extra in the Isaac and Ishmael paradigm, that one gets the birthright and the other one does not. And the reason that he did not get the birthright doesn't mean that one character is perfect and the other one is not. It just means that he's not fit for this job, for what we want to convey. And what we want to convey, and we will now learn about it. So maybe let's get to the next story with the 3 wells, and I think it'll clarify a few things of why Jacob is the one who gets the birthright. There's something about Jacob that Esau doesn't have, and what he doesn't have is that it's very important. He was not fully grown, but he was made. It says that he was made. There was something about him that was already complete. So he didn't really have that room to develop, and he didn't have it in him to see the spiritual development needed in this world. He was a physical person. Everything was physical for him. He was outdoorsy. He was a hunter. He saw red things. The red is, of course, the body, the blood. He didn't see the soul. So he could have been a very good person on certain levels, but not fit to continue to lead the family business, which is the business of the soul, is bringing heaven to earth. He wasn't doing that. He didn't even understand what is that birthright. What is our father doing here? That his father Abraham started this thing in this world. I don't even get it, right? You always, in every family, you have a person, you have a child that doesn't get Judaism, doesn't get what we're doing here, and they go another way. That's fine. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It's just they're not getting it. So Esau, without getting to other midrashim that say why he was maybe sinful in one sense or other thing, but he just doesn't get the spiritual breath, the breathing and the exhale and inhale, right? The movement of the spirit and the moon and so forth. He's the sun. He has his light. He's done. So he belongs to a different story. And of course, today and in the Talmud, what became the ancestry of or the progeny of Esau is what we see today as Christianity. So Ishmael is Islam, and Esau is Christianity. But let's leave that aside for a second, and I want to continue with the three wells, and that's we have three wells. That the third one is Rehoboth, and we're in Rehoboth, Israel now. Very, of course, interesting timing. And it says that Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold the same year, and that Hashem blessed him. And then it says, and the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. And then he acquired flocks and herds and the large household, so that the Philistines envied him. Okay, sounds familiar? That Philistines, right? I mean, the word Palestinians today come from, they're not the same people, but the name Palestine comes from the Philistines. And why did the Romans change the name of Judah to Philistina? Because they wanted to bring to spite, right? They brought, after the rebellion against them in then 70 AD and then 135, the Bar Kokhba rebellion that totally erased the Jewish population from the land. Almost, there was always Jewish people in the land, but the majority and the main community was exiled or killed, and they changed the name to Philistina, which is the whole region. Philistines originally were by the coastline, where Gaza is today. That's where the Philistines were. So they are actually, what the Romans did, they changed the name to Philistina because they wanted to bring back that idea of the struggle with the enemy that the Jewish people had for many years, and that's the most kind of aggravating enemy. So what happens is he acquired flocks and herds and a large household, so that the Philistines envied him. Okay, so Palestinians today, we build beautiful country, land, and it's really, a lot of it is envy. And now we get to this heart of the story. Beautiful, beautiful story and teaching. So what happens? And the Philistines stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with earth. So what happened? He clearly, this land doesn't have a lot. We're in November now, and I'm sitting outside, and it's like 80 degrees. So it doesn't have a lot of rain. I've been here now 3 weeks, and it rained 3 days. So it doesn't have a lot of rain, and so any water that you get is either through cisterns that you hold the water, or through wells So clearly they knew how to dig the wells, but a well in the Torah is not just a well. Nothing in the Torah, in the Bible, is just on the face level, right? It has the simple level and has the deeper level. So literally the deeper level of a well, the Talmud tells us, every time the Torah mentions a body of water, it doesn't matter what body of water, natural body of water, it refers to Torah, the living water. We call the Torah, the teaching, the tree of life, as the living water. So by the Philistines destroying or filling up the wells that Abraham dug in the beginning, what it really is telling us two things, that, and really one essence, is that they don't want us to be in the land. They want to destroy our connection to the land, but not just through the physical destruction of the wells, the water, but the wells as the symbol of Torah, the connection to the land. That's where they really want to hurt us, to say to us, this is not your place. The fact that you have this idea, crazy Meshuggah idea, that this is your land somehow, it's a promised land, that you're somehow connected to this land, forget about it. So from the first generation after Abraham, we already have these Philistines who try to compromise our connection to the land. And so they destroy the wells, and Avimelech said to Isaac, he's the king, same king, could be his son, but it's the same name. Avimelech, the same person that in the time of Abraham, his father, they had the same quarrel, but then they made peace before Abraham dies. So Avimelech, he's the king of the area. Avimelech literally in Hebrew means my father, the king. And Avimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you have become far too big for us. So we see this throughout the generations. Later on, when the Israelites are in Egypt, right, and they come down as a people to work or to dwell in the land when there was a famine, and Joseph brings them to the land of Goshen that is very fertile, but then they become very successful and flourish and multiply. And what happens? Pharaoh says, I don't like that. They're getting too big. And if there would be a battle, a war against our enemies, they will join our enemies and they will throw us out of this land. So that fear already causes them to want to expel Jews, and that happened throughout Jewish history. The Jewish people go through this phase of being exiled, going somewhere, being the subject of envy of the people around us, and then there are consequences. Either we are getting pogroms or exiled, or both, and that's an ongoing cycle. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the Wadi of Gerar, where he settled. So he goes from there and he goes to Gerar. And then what he does, so this is kind of the first exile. It's within the land, but we were asked to move. We were pushed out because we were successful. So what happened? He moves, and Isaac dug a new well, which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and which the Philistines had stopped up after Abram's death. Okay, so there was already, even in that area of Gerar, and he gave them the same names that his father had given them. It's very interesting. He gives them the same name. What he wants to do, it's almost like returning to the land, just like the Jewish people returned to the land in sovereignty after 2,000 years. But when you go back to the land, you can never do the same thing. We're never going to be the same thing. We're not the same people that left the land here 2,000 years ago. So we need to figure out a new way to dig our wells, right? To be connected, to reinterpret the Torah for its time and its place. So we learn this from this story of Isaac. That's why this story is so critically important. So it says, but Isaac's servants, digging in the wadi, found there a well of spring water. Okay, so he gives them the same name, meaning he wants to connect to the tradition of his father, and he gives them the same name. And they dig and they find a well of spring water, which means also the idea of Torah. It's comfortable for them; they can live there. But then the herdsman of Gerar, it's not Avimelech. Now it's different people where he moved. The herdsman of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsman, saying, the water is ours. He named that well Esek, because they contended with him. So the word Esek in Hebrew means to contend. It's just to have a kind of a quarrel. And so he leaves it alone. He seemed to be a very peaceful person. He's not there to battle with anybody. He's not intentionally trying to conquer anybody. He just wants to live in the land. So he leaves that one alone. And then he digs another one. And when they dug another well, they disputed over that one also. So he named it Sitna. So Sitna, as opposed to Esek, Esek means to just quarrel, to just have some sort of disagreement. But Sitna is hatred in Hebrew. So it's now the heat, it's heating up. It's not, what they're seeing is that he's not just giving up on the land. He's a peaceful person, but he's not just going to be a pushover. That there's something about this land that he's connected to, and it's not temporary, and they're not going to just be able to push him out of this land. He's fighting for it. So, but he leaves that alone. But he understands that there's something, a step up here in the hatred towards him. And then they go, it says he moved from there somehow, and he dug yet another well. So now it's the third time, right, that he moves and he tries to find another place, and they did not quarrel over it. So he finds a place, or again, it doesn't say, the word in Hebrew is vayatek. It maybe he moved maybe physically, but maybe he also moved something mentally. And I will explain. He moved from there and dug yet another well, and they did not quarrel it, so he called it Rehoboth. And that's where the name Rehoboth comes from, where I am at my parents' house in Israel, my hometown.
What does Rehoboth mean?
I'm getting it. I'm getting there. Rehoboth means wide. We have, and I've written about it for many years now, and actually our trips to pilgrimages to Israel, the last day, we call it from Egypt to Rehoboth. And we start in the Egyptian border in Eilat, and we travel all the way to Rehoboth, and we end the trip in Rehoboth with usually dinner with my family, a traditional Yemenite dinner, and then we depart to the airport. But Rehoboth, from Egypt to Rehoboth, and to understand Rehoboth, you need to understand Egypt. And we had Egypt in this parasha already, that Isaac, we skipped that part, but Isaac wants to go down to Egypt because of the famine. But God tells him, you, as opposed to Abraham, your father, and Jacob, your son, you cannot leave the land. I don't want you to go anywhere. I don't want you to go down to Egypt. And it's always going down to Egypt. It's always down. Doesn't matter if geographically you go up and down, but spiritually it's going down. To understand Rehoboth, you have to understand Egypt. And Egypt to Rehoboth is the spiritual journey of the Jewish people. We begin in Egypt as a people. That's when we become a people from a family that went down, and we come out, we're born out of this womb of Egypt. But Egypt means narrow. Mitzrayim is narrow straits. That's what it literally means. So Egypt is a concept. It's not just a place. It means a narrow place, something that narrows down on your life, that oppresses you, enslaves you, the hierarchy of one above the other. If you're a poor person, if you have some sort of weakness in the ancient world, what they did was take advantage of that and made you a slave. What we're doing as a Jewish people, we have inverted the Egyptian pyramid of enslavement, that there's one person at the top and everybody works for that person. The inversion of that pyramid means we the people, sounds familiar? We the people, in America, of course, the concept of America, the spirit of America is the same idea, is we the people, we're at the top, which means that a public servant is serving the people. And if you are sick or tired, we take care of you. You become our first priority. We don't take advantage of you. And we have here Deborah Cassell, whose stepfather was Emma Lazarus's great nephew. And we know that Emma Lazarus' song on the Statue of Liberty, give me your poor and your tired. Right. So this is the story. We do that. Abram's tent did that. So we come out of Egypt. This is the world that we leave. The world that wants us to sacrifice our children, to throw them to the Molech, to make them slaves. We don't do that. We come out of it. And Rehoboth is the last stop. Rehoboth means wide. And Rehoboth means that from the vertical structure of hierarchy and enslavement, we moved it to horizontal, that everybody is equal in the eyes of the law, everybody is equal in the eyes of God. Of course, we're not the same. That's not saying that we're all the same, but we're all equal on certain levels. So that Rehoboth, it says, so he dug that well, so he called it Rehoboth, saying, now at last God has granted us ample space to increase in the land. So he gave us the width, the breadth. Now there's a very important teaching by Nachmanides. He's a Kabbalist, and he says, and of course, the many commentators and rabbis then followed, of course, this teaching that comes from Kabbalah, that talks about those three wells as the three temples in Jerusalem. Two were destroyed, and it says the first one was destroyed through Esek, same as the well, because the Babylonians were there and they destroyed it, but not because they necessarily hated the Jews. They wanted to conquer the land. They wanted to be an empire, and we were in their way. So they destroyed the temple. But the second one that was destroyed by the Romans, there are two opinions what the hatred was. Of course, the Romans really hated us, even theologically. They were pagan. They hated us because we were a thorn in their thigh, because where Israel and Judea was, or is, was right in the middle of what they were trying to create, a contiguous empire that goes from Egypt to Syria. That was already always the most strategic kind of contiguous geography, because it is where you have to cross. If you want to go to Europe, to Asia, to Africa, you have to cross this land. So, but the other opinion about what hatred is connected to the second temple is that we hated each other. It was an internal hatred within the Jewish people, the house divided, that caused the destruction of the temple. Our enemies saw our weakness, and they took advantage of it, just like our enemies took advantage of us on October 7th, 2 years ago. Our enemies always see our weakness and go through that. So that hatred, whatever it was, external or internal or both, was already one level more intensified in the heat of that of the destruction. And then Rehoboth would be the third temple. And he said it would be the temple that will not be destroyed. So, but this is where the key is. In the first two wells, Isaac, this is, I think it's the most important, one of the most, if not the most important lesson that the Torah wants us to start with. Isaac is the first generation after Abraham who started this family business called Judaism. And we say that Abraham was chosen by God because God said that he will be able to teach his children to pass on the tradition, but not only pass on the tradition to them, to the next generation, because if it would have ended with Isaac, it's the same as being ended with Abram. That doesn't mean anything. But he will instill in them the fire, right? And we call it the fire, Esh HaTorah, the fire of Torah, something, the eternal fire, that not only will they be hooked into it, but they will then pass it on to the next generation. And we're sitting here on Zoom, but we're sitting here 4,000 years later after the story. 4,000 years. And we're still learning about this lesson. And we're still all connected to the Torah. Through calling ourselves Jews, through going to synagogue, through praying, through studying Torah, through identifying as Jews, doesn't matter. We are still linked and believe in this story. So Isaac here is so crucial because he's the first link that continues from Isaac. So the lesson that we're learning from Isaac in this story are the lessons that show us why our people are still connected. And this is where it is. There are a few ways to look at it. So the first two wells that Isaac digs, he calls them after the wells that before Esek and Sitnah. He tries to imitate his father. Now, it's not wrong. It's good because he tries to continue the tradition. But at a certain point, he understands that he has to dig a different well. He cannot just keep digging his father's wells. He still keeps digging wells. He's still doing the same idea of connecting the Torah to the land, to the teaching. But he has to customize it because it's not going to work. It's like bread. God says you want to eat fresh bread every day. He gave us the manna in the desert every day because he wanted us to eat fresh. Because eating fresh is not just the physical eating, of course. It means that we are connected every day. We trust God, that God will provide. That the word manna in Hebrew literally means faith, emunah. When we say amen, it means emunah, it means faith. Yes, we are faithful, we believe in this. So just like bread, you can't, if you want to eat fresh bread, you have to make it every day. So every generation has to reinterpret the Torah, has to dig its own well in order for it to sustain itself in the land. What we say in every blessing in the Torah, when we pray the silent prayer, we say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And the question that the Talmud asks, why do we need to say the God of Isaac, Abraham, the God of Isaac? It's repeating itself superfluously. Why? Why not just bundle it and say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? We know it's the same God. But that's exactly the point. They each found God separately. Yes, it's the same God. It's the one God. If we believe in one God, there's only one God to find. But they connected, through their own well. Otherwise, you can't protect something that you didn't dig, that it's not made for your size, that you don't believe in it. So as important as the tradition is, of course, every generation, and that's what we teach as the Jewish people, we are flexible enough within our tradition to keep the old wells. Absolutely. We still study the same text that is 4,000 years old. But every generation interprets it differently. Not entirely differently, of course, but in their own way. And the fact that I'm sitting now in my parents' house, that I grew up in this is my hometown, they are the generation that crossed the desert to come to Israel after 2,700 years. So I was the first generation born in the land after 2,000 years. And all my classmates, I had 40 classmates from 25 countries that spoke the languages. They either were immigrants themselves or their parents. So first, second generation. So my generation, and kind of the time that I grew up in, was the time to literally recreate and redig the Jewish well. And we knew that it's not going to be the same well. It's impossible. We have to re-examine the whole thing. So Rehoboth, and that's why he said this is the third temple that will not be destroyed. Rehoboth means wide because it is more inclusive in many ways. It needs to be, my house is a house of prayer for all nations, but also the way we think about how Judaism works, it needs to include now our whole diaspora. It's a very diverse people now in Israel. Imagine the people that were exiled in the first exile of the Babylonians. We were kind of one mix. there were 12 tribes, 13 tribes, but still. But now that the Jewish people have been in the world, in the diaspora, for 2,000 years, 2,700 years, in the case of the Yemenite Jews, imagine the richness and what we learned from all the other nations that we've been in. So we bring a much wider and diverse tradition now. And if we figure this out, we have to understand that we have to move from there. Isaac moves from there and he digs the well, the Rehoboth well. So we have to understand that we have to move one way or another from our ancient tradition, hold on to it, hold on to the first two wells, but create something a little different that will fit us. And that's the story. That's why the journey begins in Egypt, in the narrow mindedness, narrow straits, whatever it is, the narrowness, we come out of that. This is not the Jewish people. And we end with Rehoboth, with wide, diverse. That's the key to our survival. And that's the beauty, and that's how Toledot, the name of this parasha, can move on when we understand and not force the next generation to be like us. It's very tempting, and many societies do that, but that's where they disappear. And the Jewish people continues because we understand that just like the first and second generation, from Abram to Isaac, they had to reinterpret. We let our children reinterpret for themselves the next generation of Judaism. And that's the key. So we will.
That was awesome. That was an awesome talk. That was
Thank
really
you.
awesome.
I promised you it's going to be a good one. And the fact that I'm here, and I didn't really plan on it, it really is incredible. I have to say the Rehoboth, the city I grew up in, is actually, it lives up to its name. It's a very, very diverse place, and that's what I loved as a kid. I have, as I said, just in my class, homeroom class, we had 40 kids from 25 countries that spoke different languages, ate different foods, had different customs. It was beautiful. It's a university city, the Weizmann Institute is here, and the University of Agriculture of the Hebrew University is here. So it's very scientific on one side, but it's very agricultural too. It has very educated people, less educated, poor, wealthy, rich, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, Yemenite, very secular, very, very secular. You can imagine all the professors in the Weizmann Institute, and very, very religious. There are ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods in Rehoboth. And the beauty of it in Rehoboth is that everybody somehow lives and let live. There was never demonstrations against each other. Like in Jerusalem, you hear sometimes demonstrations against secular, religious, certain streets are blocked. And here, really, in Rehoboth, there's some sort of maturity that is really beautiful.